Welcome back, dear friends and story lovers. Tonight we bring you a tale where love is tested, secrets come to light, and fate takes an unexpected turn. Every moment will pull you in deeper, and every choice could change everything. Breathless. Where you're watching from in the comments, and if this story touches your heart, like, subscribe, share it with someone who believes in true love, and hit the bell so you never miss the next chapter. The antique desk drawer yielded its secrets. With a soft click, the hidden key turning in Elara's trembling fingers. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the east wing windows, but nothing could have prepared her for what lay inside that locked compartment. Dozens of them, yellowed with age, each one carefully preserved behind plastic sleeves. Every headline screamed the same story. Tragic house fire claims Monroe family. Tech executive and wife die in Santa Barbara blaze. Daughter survives mysterious fire. Her parents' faces stared back at her from grainy photographs, younger than she remembered them, their smiles frozen in time. But it wasn't the familiar images that made her breath catch. It was the careful annotations in the margins written. In Jonathan's precise handwriting, names circled in red ink, dates highlighted in yellow, question marks and exclamation points scattered like breadcrumbs leading to some terrible truth. The floorboards creaked behind her. She spun around, clutching a photograph of her father to her chest, to find Jonathan standing in the doorway. His usually composed face had gone pale, his dark eyes fixed on the contents of the drawer spread across the Persian rug. "You weren't supposed to find that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. "What is all this? Why do you have newspaper clippings about my parents' death?" He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot in the silence. "Sit down, Elara." "No." She backed away from him, the photograph crinkling in her grip. "Not until you tell me why you've been collecting information about the fire for 5 years. Not until you explain why there are names I don't recognize circled on these articles." Jonathan's jaw tightened. He looked older suddenly, the weight of whatever secrets he carried aging him before her eyes. "Some truths are more dangerous than lies. I'm 18 now. I can handle the truth. Can you?" His voice was sharp, cutting. "Can you handle knowing that your father wasn't the man you remember? That the fire that killed your parents wasn't an accident?" The words hit her like physical blows. The photograph slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor. "What are you talking about?" Jonathan moved closer, his presence filling the small space between them. "Your father stole from dangerous people, Elara. He took something that belonged to men who kill for less. The fire was their way of sending a message. You're lying. I wish I was." He knelt, gathering the scattered clippings with practiced efficiency. "Thomas Monroe was my business partner before you were born. He built the first version of my security software together, but he got greedy. He sold our prototype to competitors, pocketed the money, and disappeared." Elara's legs gave out. She sank onto the dusty floorboards, her mind reeling. "That's impossible. My father was a marketing consultant. He worked for small companies. Your father was living under an assumed identity. His real name was Thomas Garrett, and he was wanted by both the FBI and some very unforgiving creditors." Jonathan's hands stilled on the papers. "I spent 3 years tracking him down, planning my revenge. But when I found him, he had you and your mother. He'd built a life, become a different man. I thought maybe he deserved a second chance." Room spun around her. Everything she thought she knew about her childhood, her family, her entire existence, crumbled like ash in her hands. "So you just left him alone?" "I tried to." Jonathan's voice was hollow. "But the men he stole from never stopped looking. They found him eventually, and they made sure his death looked like an accident. The only reason you survived is because you were at a sleepover that night." Elara stared at him, pieces of a horrific puzzle clicking into place. "You knew they were coming. I got word 3 days before it happened. I tried to warn him, but Thomas was too proud, too stubborn. He thought he could handle it himself." Jonathan's fists clenched around the clippings. "I was supposed to be on a business trip that weekend. Instead, I sat in my car 2 blocks away and watched your house burn." The confession hung between them like smoke. Elara felt something cold and terrible unfurling in her chest. "You let them die? I saved you." His eyes met hers, blazing with an intensity that made her shrink back. "Do you think it was coincidence that I walked into that shelter 3 days later? That I fought through months of legal red tape to become your guardian? I couldn't save your parents, but I could save you." She scrambled to her feet, backing toward the window. "This is insane. You're insane. You've been lying to me for 5 years. I've been protecting you for 5 years." He stood slowly, his movements predatory. "Those men who killed your parents are still out there. They know you exist, they know you're Thomas's daughter, and they know that someday you might come looking for answers. The only thing keeping you alive is the fact that they think you're just some orphaned girl living quietly with her guardian. I need to leave." The words tumbled out of her mouth before she could stop them. "I need to get away from you, from this house, from all of this." Jonathan moved faster than she expected, his hand slamming against the window frame beside her head, trapping her between his body and the glass. "You can't leave, Elara. Not now, not ever." His face was inches from hers, his breath warm against her skin. For a moment she saw past the control and the secrets to something raw and desperate underneath. It's something that looked almost like love. "Because if you do," he whispered, his voice breaking, "they'll kill you just like they killed them." Elara didn't sleep that night. She paced her bedroom like a caged animal, Jonathan's words echoing in her skull until she thought she might go mad. Every creak of the old mansion made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hide watching eyes. Truth he'd revealed felt like poison in her veins, changing everything she'd ever believed about herself. At dawn, she found him in the kitchen, already dressed in his usual black suit, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold at his elbow. He looked up when she entered, and she saw her own sleeplessness reflected in the dark circles under his eyes. "I need proof," she said, without preamble. He nodded as if he'd been expecting this. From his briefcase, he withdrew a manila folder, thick with documents, birth certificates, death certificates, police reports, FBI files. Her father's face stared up at her from a criminal mugshot, but the name beneath it read Thomas Garrett. This is impossible. But even as she said it, she recognized something familiar in the booking photo. The way her father held his left shoulder, slightly higher than his right. The same unconscious gesture she made when nervous. "Your mother knew," Jonathan said quietly. "She married him anyway, helped him build a new life. They were happy, Elara. Whatever else was true, they loved each other, and they loved you." She flipped through the documents, her hands shaking. Bank records showing massive withdrawals, witness statements placing Thomas Garrett at the scene of a corporate break-in. Finally, a handwritten note in her father's familiar scrawl. "If something happens to me, find Jonathan Kane. He's the only one who can protect Elara."
Yes.
"He wrote this to my mother," she whispered. 3 weeks before the fire, she never had a chance to follow through. Jonathan's voice was carefully neutral, but she caught the edge of pain underneath. "She died trying to get to your room to save you." Tears she'd been holding back for hours finally spilled over. Elara pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the flood. "Why didn't you tell me this before? All these years, letting me think it was just some random accident?" "Because knowing the truth makes you a target." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens. "As long as you believed your father was just Thomas Monroe, marketing consultant, you were safe. No one would think to look for Thomas Garrett's daughter in the art studios of an expensive boarding school. But they're still out there. Kowalski brothers. Polish mob, based out of Chicago, been running a sophisticated money laundering operation through tech companies for 15 years. Jonathan's reflection in the window was grim. Your father cost them $12 million in 3 years of work. They're not the type to forgive and forget. A new horror crept up Elara's spine. How do you know so much about them? Turned, and for the first time since she'd known him, his mask of control slipped completely. What she saw underneath made her blood run cold, because I've been hunting them for 5 years. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too airless. Hunting. Then did you really think I brought you here out of guilt? His laugh was bitter, hollow. I've been using you as bait, Elara. Every public appearance, every art show, every carefully orchestrated photo in the society pages, I've been dangling you in front of them like a worm on a hook, waiting for them to take the bait. The folder slipped from her numb fingers, scattering papers across the marble floor. You're lying. The private security you thought was for your protection? They're not guards, they're hunters. The tutors who came to the house? All former FBI, all specialists in organized crime. Even your art teacher, Margaret, was a federal agent. Jonathan's eyes were black, empty. I've spent 5 years turning you into the perfect trap. Lara backed away from him, her hip hitting the marble counter. This can't be real. You saved me. You took care of me. Turned you into a weapon. His voice was flat, clinical. Every skill you learned, every connection you made, every piece of your life was designed to draw them out. And it worked. Made contact 3 months ago. The world tilted on its axis. What? Your art professor at the gallery opening last month? The one who was so interested in your family history? Victor Kowalski. He's been watching you for weeks. Jonathan pulled out his phone, swiping to a surveillance photo. He thinks he's being subtle, but I've had eyes on him since he stepped off the plane from Chicago. Lara stared at the grainy image of a middle-aged man with sharp cheekbones and cold eyes. She remembered him clearly now, how he'd lingered at her paintings, asking questions about her childhood, her memories of her parents. You knew, she whispered. You knew he was there, and you let me talk to him. I needed him to believe you were innocent, naive, just a traumatized girl with no knowledge of her father's crimes. Jonathan's smile was sharp as broken glass. And you've played the part perfectly. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. All the years of distance, of careful boundaries, of making her feel like an unwanted burden, it had all been an act. She was nothing more than a tool to him, a means to an end. I trusted you, she said, her voice breaking. Trust was never part of the equation. Rage, hot and pure, flooded through her veins. Without thinking, she grabbed the heavy crystal vase from the counter and hurled it at his head. Jonathan ducked, the vase shattering against the wall behind him, sending water and white roses cascading to the floor. You used me, she screamed. You made me fall in love with you, and all along I was just part of some sick revenge plot. Something flickered in his eyes at that, something almost human. Elara, I don't. She was backing toward the door, her heart hammering. Don't you dare say my name like you care about me. Everything I did was to protect you. You turned me into bait. I turned you into a survivor. His composure finally cracked, his voice rising to match hers. Do you know what the Kowalski brothers did to the last person who crossed them? They kept him alive for 3 days, Elara. 3 days of agony before they finally let him die. I wasn't going to let that happen to you, so instead you decided to use me to destroy them, yes. No apology, no shame, just cold, brutal honesty. And tomorrow night, when Victor thinks he's finally found Thomas Garrett's innocent daughter, I'm going to kill him and his brother both. Elara's hand found the doorknob behind her. What happens tomorrow night? Jonathan's smile returned, predatory and terrifying. Your 18th birthday party, sweetheart? It's the one where you're going to help me finish what your father started? The grand ballroom of the Kane estate had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across walls draped in silk and gold, and the air was heavy with the scent of hundreds of white roses. Guests, in designer gowns and tailored suits, mingled beneath soaring ceilings, their laughter echoing off marble columns like music from another world. Elara stood at the top of the curved staircase, watching the scene below through the ornate balustrade. In her midnight blue gown, with her dark hair swept into an elegant updo, she looked every inch the privileged heiress celebrating her coming. Of age, no one looking at her would guess that beneath the silken pearls her heart was hammering with terror. Beautiful, isn't she? The voice came from directly behind her, accented with Eastern European inflections. Elara turned to find a man she didn't recognize, Eileen, with silver hair and eyes like winter ice. He wore an expensive tuxedo and held 2 glasses of champagne, but something about his smile made her skin crawl. I'm sorry, do we know each other, she asked, though she already suspected who he was. Not yet, but I feel like I know you very well. He offered her one of the glasses. Your father and I were business associates. I'm Alexei Kowalski, not Victor. Alexei, the older brother, the one Jonathan had mentioned in passing, as being even more dangerous. Elara's hand trembled as she accepted the champagne, but she forced her voice to remain steady. I'm sorry, but I don't know anything about my father's business relationships. He died when I was very young. Gah, of course he did. Lexi's smile widened, revealing teeth too. White and too sharp. Such a tragedy, that fire, so sudden, so convenient for certain people. I don't know what you mean, don't you? He moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something metallic that made her stomach turn. Tell me, Miss Monroe, has your guardian ever mentioned what your father took from us before he ran? Every instinct screamed at her to run, but Elara forced herself to look confused. Took from you? Think you have me confused with someone else? $12 million, Alexei continued as if she hadn't spoken. Plus the prototype for a security system that would have revolutionized our operations. Your father was quite clever, disappearing like that. We searched for years. My father was a marketing consultant. Your father was a thief. The words were delivered with surgical precision. And thieves' children often inherit more than just their parents' debts. Below them, the orchestra began playing a waltz. Couples moved onto the dance floor in perfect synchronization, their movements as choreographed as everything else in Jonathan's carefully constructed world. Elara scanned the crowd looking for him, but he was nowhere to be seen. Looking for someone? Alexei asked. My guardian. He should be here for the toast. Mr. Keene is quite busy at the moment. He's having a conversation with my brother in his study. A very private conversation about old debts and new opportunities. Lexi's grip on his champagne glass tightened. You see, we've come to collect what your father owed us. With interest, the blood drained from Elara's face. I don't have $12 million. No, but you have something much more valuable. His free hand moved to his jacket pocket, and she glimpsed the outline of something small and deadly. You have information. Memories. Things your father might have told you before he died. He didn't tell me anything. I was 13 when he died. I barely understood what was happening. Perhaps. But you understand now, don't you? Lexi's voice dropped to a whisper. You understand that your entire life has been a lie. That the man who raised you has been using you to draw us out. That tonight was always meant to end in blood. Elara's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble step. The crystal fragments scattered like stars, and several guests below looked up at the sound. She forced a bright smile, waving apologetically, but inside her mind was racing. If Alexei knew about Jonathan's plan, then everything had gone wrong. Which meant Jonathan was either already dead or walking into a trap he hadn't anticipated. Where is he? She asked, still breathing for now. My brother is quite skilled at extracting information from reluctant subjects, but his patience has limits. Alexei moved closer, his hands settling on her lower back in a gesture that would look protective to observers, but felt like a threat. You're going to come with me, Miss Monroe? We're going to have a conversation about your father's final words. And then you're going to help us retrieve what belongs to us. And if I refuse, then Mr. Kane dies very slowly, and you die very quickly. His smile never wavered. Your choice. They began descending the staircase together, Alexei's hand. A constant pressure against her spine? To anyone watching, they looked like an elegant older gentleman escorting the guest of honor to her own party. No one could see the weapon pressed against her ribs or hear the threats whispered in her ear. Halfway down the stairs, Elara made her decision. Wait, she said, stopping abruptly. I need to tell you something about my father. Alexei paused, his eyes narrowing. What he did tell me something before he died? About you and your brother? About what he took? She turned to face him, her voice dropping to match his conspiratorial whisper. But not here. Too many people. If you want to know what he said, we need to go somewhere private. Where? Elara pointed toward a corridor that led away from the ballroom, toward the wing of the house where her art studio was located. My workshop. It's soundproof, private, and... She paused as if reluctant to continue. And that's where he hid it. Hid what? The thing you're really looking for? Not the money that's long gone, but the other thing. The thing that's worth more than $12 million. She met his eyes, pouring every ounce of desperate sincerity she could muster into her voice. "The reason you really killed my parents." For the first time since she'd met him, Alexei looked genuinely surprised. And in that moment of uncertainty, Elara saw her chance. "Lead the way," he said. As they walked away from the light and laughter of the ballroom, Elara's hand found the small device Jonathan had given her weeks ago, hidden in the folds of her gown. A panic button, he'd called it, for emergencies only. She pressed it twice. The signal they'd agreed on for immediate danger. Behind them, the orchestra played on, and the guests continued dancing, oblivious to the fact that the birthday girl had just walked into the darkness with a killer who had no intention of letting her see another dawn. The art studio felt different in the darkness. Own light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across Elara's paintings and sculptures. The familiar sense of oil paint and turpentine should have been comforting, but with Alexei Kowalski standing behind her, weapon drawn, the room felt like a tomb. "Well," he said, his patience clearly wearing thin, "where is it?" Alla moved toward her easel, her hands trembling as she pretended to search through her supplies. "He told me it was hidden behind one of my paintings. Something about hiding in plain sight." "Which painting?" She gestured toward the far wall, where her largest canvas hung a dark, abstract piece she'd painted during her most troubled period. "That one," he said. "If anything ever happened to him, I should look behind the storm." As Alexei moved toward the painting, Elara caught a glimpse of movement outside the window. A shadow detaching itself from the garden, moving with lethal purpose. Toward the house. Jonathan, she realized with a mixture of relief and terror. He'd received her signal. "There's nothing here," Alexei snarled, running his hands along the frame. "Look harder." Elara backed toward her supply cabinet, her fingers searching for the knife she used to scrape paint from her palette. "Maybe there's a hidden compartment." Door exploded inward just as her hand closed around the blade. Jonathan rolled through the opening, blood streaming from a cut above his left eye, his own weapon already raised. Behind him came another man, Victor Kowalski, she realized, sporting a broken nose and the beginnings of spectacular bruises. "Let her go," Jonathan said, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos. Alexei laughed, grabbing Elara around the waist and pressing the gun to her temple. "I don't think so. You see, your little bird here has been very informative. She's told me all about where her father hid our property. She doesn't know anything about your property." "No. Then why did she bring me here? Why did she tell me her?" "Father confessed everything before he died." Alexei's grip tightened, making Elara gasp. "You trained her well, Kane. She's an excellent liar." Jonathan's eyes met Elara's across the room, and she saw something there she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. "This was never about the money," he said quietly. "Of course not. The money was pocket change. We came for her." "Why?" The question came from Elara herself, the word torn from her throat despite the gun at her head. Victor stepped forward, wiping blood from his mouth. "Because your father didn't just steal from us, little girl. He stole something that belonged to our family. Our sister." The room went silent except for the sound of Elara's ragged breathing. "What are you talking about?" Jonathan demanded. "Alina Kowalski," Victor continued, his eyes never leaving Elara's face. "Our baby sister. She was supposed to marry a Russian oligarch, cement a very profitable alliance. Instead, she fell in love with Thomas Garrett and ran away with him too. America." The knife slipped from Elara's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. "That's impossible, is it? Think about it, little bird. Think about your mother's accent that never quite disappeared, her insistence on speaking to you in Russian. When you were very young, the lullabies she sang that sounded nothing like American songs. Images flooded Elara's memory, her mother's careful pronunciation of certain words, the way she flinched whenever crime shows came on television, the locked jewelry box that contained photographs of people Elara had never met. She was Alina Kowalski before she became Elena Monroe," Alexei said softly. "And you, little bird, are our niece." "No." Jonathan's voice cut through the revelation like a blade. "One researched your family extensively. Alina Monroe was born in Ohio. I have her birth certificate, forged, just like her husband's." Victor's smile was cold. "Thomas Garrett was very good at creating new identities. Created one for himself, and one for the woman he loved. Blood doesn't lie, Kane. Look at her. Really look at her. Against her will, Elara found herself studying Victor's face, then Alexei's. The same high cheekbones she saw in the mirror every morning, the same unusual green eyes, the same stubborn set to the jaw. Even if that's true, Jonathan said, it doesn't change anything. She's still innocent in all of this. Innocent? Alexei laughed. She's the daughter of a thief and a traitor. She carries our blood and our shame. It's the only way to cleanse that shame is with her death. You're talking about killing your own niece? Honor is more important than family, Victor said. Our sister chose her path when she betrayed us. Her daughter must pay the price for that choice. Elara felt something break inside her at those words. Not her heart, but something deeper. The last vestige of the frightened girl she'd been died in that moment, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. You want to know what my father really told me before he died? She said, her voice steady for the first time since this. Nightmare began. Both brothers looked at her with interest. Told me that the Kowalski family were cowards who preyed on the weak, because they weren't strong enough to build anything lasting on their own. He said that's why my mother left. Not for love, but because she was ashamed to share your name. Alexei's face went white with rage. You little bitch. He also told me this. Elara drove her elbow backward into Alexei's solar plexus with all her strength. As he doubled over, gasping, she twisted away from his grip and dove toward the floor, where she dropped the palette knife. Jonathan moved at the same instant, his weapon barking twice. Victor spun and fell, clutching his shoulder, but Alexei was already recovering, raising his gun toward. Elara's crouched form, the palette knife found its mark just below his ribs, sliding between bone and muscle with surprising ease. Alexei's eyes went wide with shock and pain. Blood bubbled from his lips as he tried to speak. That's for my parents, Elara whispered. She twisted the blade, and Alexei Kowalski crumpled to the floor of her art studio, his blood mixing with the paint stains on the wooden boards. In the sudden silence, Elara became aware of sirens in the distance, growing closer. Jonathan had already zip-tied Victor's hands behind his back and was applying pressure to the man's shoulder wound. Are you hurt? Jonathan asked, not looking at her. No. She stared down at her bloody hands, surprised by how steady they were. Is it over? It's over. Gert laughed weakly from his position on the floor. You think killing us ends this? We have family in Chicago, New York, Miami. They'll come for her eventually. Jonathan's expression didn't change. Then they'll die too. As the sirens grew louder, Elara walked to the window and looked out at the gardens where she'd spent so many peaceful afternoons. The guests were streaming out of the ballroom now, drawn by the sound of gunshots and police cars. Her birthday party had become a crime scene. What happens now? She asked. Jonathan finally looked at her and she saw something new in his eyes. Not the cold calculation she'd grown accustomed to, but something warm and protective and real. Now you get to choose, he said. You can walk away from all of this. New identity, new life, anywhere in the world you want to go. Or what? Or you stay with me and we finish cleaning up the mess your father started. His voice was quiet, uncertain in a way she'd never heard before. There are others out there, Elara. Other people who were hurt by what Thomas did. Other families, like the Kowalskis, who won't stop coming. I can't do this alone anymore. She turned away from the window, her decision already made. When she spoke, her voice carried a new authority, a new certainty that surprised them both. Then we'd better get to work. 6 months later, the Chicago skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse office. But Elara's attention was focused on the photographs spread across the mahogany conference table, crime scene photos, surveillance images, financial records, the detritus of a life spent hunting monsters in expensive suits. The Petrov family has agreed to our terms, Jonathan said, entering the room with 2 cups of coffee. Moved differently now, she noticed. Less like a predator stalking prey, and more like a man who had found his purpose. He'll transfer the stolen assets back to the families they robbed, and in exchange, we won't expose their human trafficking operation to the FBI. Elara accepted the coffee, her fingers brushing his as she took the cup. The simple contact still sent electricity up her arm, but it was different now. No longer the desperate attraction of a confused girl, but something deeper. Something built on shared violence and mutual understanding. And if they renege on the deal, then we handled them the same way we handled the Volkov brothers last month. Jonathan's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather rather than murder. Permanently. She nodded, studying the latest intelligence report. 3 crime families dismantled, dozens of victims rescued, millions in stolen assets returned to their rightful owners. The work was bloody, dangerous, and utterly necessary. Her father's sins had opened a door into a world she'd never known, existed, and now she couldn't close it again. Wouldn't close it even if she could. "There's something else," Jonathan said, his tone shifting slightly. "I got word from our contact in the bureau. They want to offer us official consultation status." Elara looked up from the photographs, surprised. "You want to legitimize what we do? Apparently our methods, while unconventional, have been remarkably effective. The FBI has been trying to crack these organizations for decades. We've done it in 6 months. Because we don't play by their rules. Because we understand that sometimes justice requires more than courtrooms and jail cells." He moved to stand beside her, looking down at a photograph of Viktor Kowalski in federal custody. "He'll be out in 8 years with good behavior. His victims will be dead forever." The weight of that truth settled between them like it always did. They both knew that Victor would never see the outside of a prison cell. Jonathan had contacts inside who ensured that certain inmates met with unfortunate accidents. It was one of the many dark compromises they'd learned to make in this new life they'd chosen. "Do you ever regret it?" Elara asked, not looking at him. "The night everything changed?" "What we became after." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of careful consideration. "I regret that you had to become this. I regret that I couldn't protect your innocence along with your life. But I don't regret choosing you over them." She turned to face him fully, studying the lines that had appeared around his eyes over the past months. The toll of their work showed in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands never quite relaxed anymore, but there was something else there too. A peace she'd never seen in him before. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About that night. About why I really came to you." His expression grew guarded. "Elara, it wasn't because I was lonely or confused or looking for comfort." She moved closer, close enough to see her reflection in his dark eyes. "It was because I knew. Somehow I knew that everything was going to change, that the girl I was wouldn't survive what was coming. I wanted to give her one perfect moment before she disappeared forever." Jonathan's hand rose to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "And do you miss her? The girl you were?" Elara leaned into his touch, remembering the frightened child who had painted landscapes to escape reality, who had believed in fairy tales and happy endings. That girl seemed like a stranger now. "No," she said, and meant it. She was weak. She let other people make choices for her. She painted pretty pictures and pretended the world was beautiful. The world can be beautiful. Yes, but only if you're willing to fight for it." She covered his hand with hers. "Only if you're willing to kill for it when necessary." It pulled her closer until there was no space left between them. When he kissed her, it tasted of coffee and shared secrets and the metallic tang of violence that never quite left their lips anymore. When they broke apart, she saw her own transformation, reflected in his gaze. "The Antonov shipment arrives next week," she said, already shifting back into business mode. 3 containers of girls from Eastern Europe, ages 12 to 16. The Coast Guard is standing by. Once we have the location confirmed, they'll move in, and Dmitry Antonov." Jonathan's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Will suffer an unfortunate accident while fleeing the scene." Elara nodded, satisfied. She gathered the photographs and reports, sliding them into a secure folder. Tomorrow, they would board a plane to Miami. In a week, another monster would be dead, and more innocent lives would be saved. It wasn't the life she'd imagined at 18, but it was the life she'd chosen, the life they'd chosen together. As they prepared to leave the office, Jonathan paused at the door. "Elara? That night you came to me. Do you know what I was thinking when I saw you standing there? She shook her head. I was thinking that I'd spent 5 years trying to turn you into a weapon, and you turned me into a man instead. His voice was soft, vulnerable in a way that reminded her of the broken whisper he'd given her in the garden months ago. I was thinking that maybe, for the first time in my life, I'd found something worth saving. Outside the windows, the city. Lights twinkled like stars, beautiful and distant and cold. Somewhere in that maze of steel and glass, predators stalked the innocent and the powerful preyed on the weak. But tonight, 2 hunters walked among the shadows, carrying justice in their hearts and blood on their hands. The girl who had painted storms was gone, replaced by the woman who became one. And in the darkness of a world that devoured innocence, that was exactly what it needed. The end.